This is Eddie Hearn, Matchroom Boxing. You are watching Sporting Icons. You don't need to be anywhere else.
Okay, so Deontay Wilder is back at it again, talking about Anthony Joshua, and of course coming up with some real delusions from his little own twerkinator mind. Anyway, he was asked about a potential Anthony Joshua fight, and this is what he had to say. I'm willing and able for everybody. I still want to whoop that ass. I'm not going to rob the fans of not making that fight happen. I definitely want to make that fight happen. I just want to know if they're for real. They made Anthony Joshua. They made him. We're born into it, not made. Even the Olympics, they gave him that medal. They bought a lot of the belts. The way they moved him and prepared him for certain moments, he was not ready for it. Deontay Wilder's statement to the Last Stand podcast, whoever they are. Now, go back to what it is that he says there. I still want to whoop that ass. Do you? Or do you want to twerk around it? I don't know. And I mean, for him to say, I'm not going to rob the fans of not making that fight happen. Well, you robbed the fans on many occasions when this fight could have and should have happened for Undisputed. You turned down $100 million so you can go fight a Tyson Fury who shouldn't have been even in a boxing ring at that time. You turned down Anthony Joshua for Undisputed. We could have had Undisputed a long time ago. All you had to do was put your name on that contract. But instead, you went and cherry-picked Tyson Fury, and that went badly, badly wrong. Across those 3 fights with Tyson Fury was not even close to what he could have got fighting Anthony Joshua. If we're talking about finances, if you're talking about legacy, well, you got your belt taken away from you by Tyson Fury. You did. But you could have fought for Undisputed. Maybe you'd have beaten Anthony Joshua. But no, you see, you allow your boss in Shelley Finkel to tell you who you fight and who you don't fight, how much you get and how much you don't get, and where you're going to fight, what platform you're going to fight. Because you can't think for yourself. Correct? And for him to say, I definitely want that fight to happen, I just want to know if they're for real. Well, they put in real money. They didn't put in fake money of $50 million in the bag to go then see Frank Warren and BT Sport to try and get that money for him to fight on BT Sport, a platform that he couldn't fight on at that time. It's all smoke and mirrors with Deontay Wilder when it comes to him. And as for them making Anthony Joshua, okay, so why is it that if he's made and they bought the belts for him, including the Olympics, okay, right, let's start off with the Olympics. There is a lot of controversy around the Olympics. People will have their own opinions about it. But let's talk about Deontay Wilder's Olympic Games. He finished 3rd place, joint 3rd place. Because obviously there's 2 bronze medalists. And that wasn't even at the super heavyweight limit, like Anthony Joshua fought. You fought at the heavyweight limit, which is the equivalent to cruiserweight. And you couldn't even get a gold then. And I know some of his Wildettes, his fans, will say things like, yeah, but he only had like 30 odd fights. Well, he had 7 fights more than Anthony Joshua. Less than Anthony Joshua, sorry. Only 7 fights. And a lot of those were because Joshua was progressing through the tournaments when Wilder was failing in the tournaments. Deontay Wilder, who turned pro, 4-5 years before Anthony Joshua, and hasn't unified not 1 belt. You want to talk about Anthony Joshua buying the belts? Well, when he first became champion defeating Charles Martin, PBC fighter. Wilder, PBC fighter. That's an in-house fight. You could have made that fight. But you didn't. When you was asked about it, well, you know what, I'd love to, but you know what, unfortunately I've got obligations. He was talking about his mandatory in Alexander Povetkin. He had a lucky escape with that one, didn't he? He had a real lucky escape with that one. But you had the option there to fight Charles Martin. But you wanted to hide behind mandatory. Okay, you wanted to hide behind mandatory when, doesn't unification trump mandatories? That fight could have happened. You waited for Anthony Joshua to fight Vladimir Klitschko to unify. You was there, Wilder. You was there at Wembley Stadium doing colour commentary for Sky Sports. After the fight, even though you were picking Klitschko to whoop him, you went up to the ring and you fist bumped Joshua and then went up to the stands. And you were praising Anthony Joshua and how good he was and it's an exciting fight and all that kind of stuff, being all pleasant and everything. Flew all the way back to Alabama and then started chastising him on social media. Didn't dare to do it to his face. But this is Joshua, who unified the belts in his 19th professional fight. You could have fought Klitschko long before that. Long before that. Let's not forget, Klitschko managed by Shelly Finkel. Well, why didn't Shelly Finkel make that fight for you at that time instead of Joshua? Why is it that Shelly Finkel, your manager, Klitschko's manager, when you won the belt in 2015 by defeating Bermane Stiverne of all people, which was your first ever step up in 33 fights against that bum, Bermane Stiverne, who defeated Chris Arreola for the vacant belt because you all waited for Vitaly Klitschko to retire. Anyway, that said, instead of going to unify against Vladimir Klitschko, your own manager said, no, Deontay, he's still a baby, he's still a prospect. Still a prospect? After 33 fights, world champion, still a prospect. Your team were manufacturing you. It was Joshua who stepped up and took on Klitschko in his 19th fight. And you couldn't even do it because you were still a baby, a prospect, out of 33 fights. After fighting nothing but cab drivers and journeymen and gatekeepers. In the meantime, you could have unified against Joseph Parker. But you didn't. I know he called out Parker, then he offered him absolute peanuts. Peanuts. So he fought Joshua instead. You had first refusal. There were pictures of you two together. You could have made that fight together. You could have done it, but you didn't do it. So Joshua was the one going around unifying belts, had every single belt except the WBC, the one that you had. And then you were offered the chance to go fight Joshua on many different contract offers, and you kept saying no. Well, Shelly Finkel kept saying no on your behalf. Wouldn't even return the phone calls. Wouldn't even return them. Wouldn't have a meeting with Eddie Hearn to make the fight. Wouldn't do anything. And it was Shelly Finkel who said that when he himself has a good relationship with the head of DAZN at the time, John Skipper, then he will make that fight between you and Joshua. But Shelly Finkel admitted that he will make that fight when he has a good relationship with DAZN. So that's telling you that he controlled your career. So you want to talk about manufactured, you're manufactured. You didn't take a meaningful step up until, was it your 39th, maybe even 40th fight, when he first fought Tyson Fury. But even then, we can't give you credit for that, because this was a Tyson Fury who was quite literally living in kebab shops, putting cocaine up his nose, boozing. That Tyson Fury. Not the Tyson Fury of now, but the Tyson Fury back then, who you cherry-picked, and you couldn't even beat him then. You couldn't even beat that Tyson Fury then. Had Joshua fought Tyson Fury then, Joshua would have knocked Tyson Fury spark out. Tyson Fury knows that. John Fury said it himself. That's what would have happened. But Fury is okay fighting you because you're a one-trick pony, because you are manufactured. And you ended up having to fight Tyson Fury 3 times. And you couldn't beat him, not once. Not once. The first fight was your opportunity. If you couldn't beat him then, you had no chance of beating him as he was starting to get back into it. And that second fight was just a complete one-sided beatdown. A beatdown. People want to give him credit for the third fight. What, credit for what? Hanging on for dear life? You're manufactured, Wilder. You are the manufactured one. You avoided Joshua. You avoided Klitschko's. Both of them. You avoided many fighters. So don't talk about manufactured. Joshua hasn't even had 33 fights yet. But his last 12 fights have all been for world titles. His next fight is going to be against Tyson Fury for another world title fight. So that'll be his 13th title fight in what, 27, 28 fights? You didn't even fight for one until your 33rd. And you want to talk about who's manufactured? Continue wanting to be pregnant, Wilder. Continue looking for IVF treatment, because you've got more chance of getting pregnant and actually getting your dream than getting in there with Anthony Joshua. than ever becoming one face, one name, one champion, one undisputed champion, and whatever else. You wouldn't have the balls to get in there with Joshua, let alone a Usyk and that. Fury, of course, you get in there with Fury because you thought he was finished. Of course you would. And then you had no choice because you agreed to rematch clauses. You had no choice. You were hoping that, again, according to Tyson Fury, you're hoping that he's going to pay you step aside. So you didn't have to get that whooping in the third fight. But Fury didn't offer you that 20 million that apparently you wanted. You're the manufactured one. You really are. And good luck in your next fight against a big, bad, tough Robert Helenius, a guy who got knocked out by 2 of your former opponents, who were also bums, in Gerald Washington and who's the other one? Johan Duapa. Manufactured. You're manufactured, you absolute weasel. Drop your thoughts below, click thumbs up, subscribe. Catch you next video.